Hey everyone, welcome to A Mess Nonetheless. I am Rachel.
And I'm Melissa, and we are sisters. And welcome. We're so happy you guys are here with us.
Yeah, welcome you guys. So we're doing something a little different this week. We're going to do a 4-part mini series instead of just one podcast on Thursday. And we're going to break these down into this topic down into 4-part series. Ideally, I think people can learn from all of them, but maybe 1 or 2 of them will apply to you more specifically. Mm-hmm. And this way we can go a little bit more in depth into each of these 4 areas. And we're actually going to be talking about conflict.
Ooh.
Because everyone hates conflict.
And everyone has conflict.
Yes, and everyone has conflict, whether you're dealing with it or not, everyone has conflict.
Exactly.
So that's what we're going to be talking about. And I actually, then we have a verse pulled out that's kind of like our theme verse for why we're doing this. And it's from Romans 12, 9 through 21. And I love it because at the head of the section, it says how to love in action is how it's been described. How to love in action. And this I just love this passage. Love should be sincere. We should hate what is evil and cling to what is good. Devote ourselves to loving one another and honoring each other above ourselves. We should always seek joy, hope, patience, and be faithful in prayer. We should practice hospitality. We're to live in harmony with one another, not being proud and not being conceited. It is our job. It is not our job to seek revenge. We should do what is right in the eyes of everyone. And as much as it depends on us, we should live in peace with others. We are to leave vengeance and judgment in God's hands. We are not to be overcome by evil, but to overcome evil with good. Killing with kindness.
Yeah.
So that's the theme verse, our passage that is kind of driving this topic. And so today we're going to be talking about when you don't deal with conflict. So like Melissa and I joked, everyone has it, whether you're dealing with it or not. Today we're going to be talking about when you don't deal with conflict. And Melissa, do you agree that I think more people don't deal with conflict than do?
100%. It actually kind of sometimes is shocking as I've become an adult. The older I get,
Did you recently become an adult?
I did. I just became an adult about a year or 2 ago, and it's really been eye-opening how many people who are also adults just ignore it. Ignore it, whether it's with their kids, whether it's with their spouse, whether it's with their friends or their coworkers, and I'm like, oh, I can only imagine how bound up inside that must feel when you just ignore it because if you're most likely, if you ignore it in one area, you're probably ignoring it in most areas in your life because just seems like that's probably a natural reaction.
Yeah. Bound up is a really good description because I just picture people being like entrapped within ropes, but also maybe constipated.
Yeah.
Both are not good.
Both are
relationally constipated.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you don't know it. And today you're going to learn it, and you are going to learn how to let the ropes be cut and the poop come a-flowing.
Take the laxative. Spiritual laxative right here.
Mom's going to hate this one. Say poop on your podcast? I didn't mean to. I should have said just spiritual laxative like Melissa, but poop came out and that
and it's already out there. And we don't edit.
So we don't edit. All right. So when we don't deal with conflict. So Melissa, do you have anything you want to start with? You want me to start talking about this? Some examples or reasons that we should deal with conflict?
Well, I feel like maybe we should just quickly explain what it looks like. How do we know if we're not dealing with conflict? Because I have a feeling a lot of people don't even realize that they're not dealing with it. And obviously everyone's personalities are different. Some people are like one of my really good friends. She's really kind of at ease with not having to go head first into every conflict, but it's not because she's not dealing with it. She deals with it differently than I do. And she just has a very different personality. And so whereas I tend to deal with it head on, like we have to talk about this right now.
I'm the same way
until we have a conversation. And where she gives it time, and sometimes time will make it where she's like, this doesn't actually need to be dealt with, which it has a lot of wisdom in it in itself, because I have learned sometimes I don't need to do every conflict head on immediately. Like sometimes giving it some time.
I've had to learn that too.
And so I want to start with there are many different ways of dealing with conflict, and we're going to share our experience. Obviously, that doesn't mean it's the only way. So if you're hearing us and you're like, oh, but I do deal with conflict, but I don't do it quite like that. That's okay, because clearly we are not the know-alls. We're just sharing our point of view and
exactly
our history with it. So, but if you aren't dealing with conflict, one way, or if you're not dealing with conflict, but you're not aware of it, I think one way you can know that is if you kind of have a general unsettling in your gut in certain relationships, like that just kind of is always there. Maybe you get nervous, like you cringe if anything, like if a conversation gets heightened, or if you maybe feel a little bit, oh, I got to go spend time with them, or I got to go see them. Like that's not a normal feeling if things are cleaned out, so to speak. Keep going down that road.
If you're regular, that's not normal. And so we're going to be continuing with this poop analogy.
Apparently it just works real well. So anyway, so that's something I would say. So you could carry on from there, Rachel.
Yeah, for sure. No, I agree with that. And I think when someone hurts your feelings and you would be like, well, I would never say anything. You're not dealing with conflict. Exactly. I'm not saying you have to tell someone every single time they hurt your feelings, but if you're like, well, I would just never say anything.
Yes. Just shove it in.
You're not dealing with conflict. If the same person says something that hurts you regularly and they don't know it hurts you, it's not something they're trying to hurt you. They just tease about something or whatever, and you couldn't fathom ever telling them. And that's someone who doesn't deal with conflict.
Yep.
If you don't stand up for yourself when you're like, hey, that's not really fair. Don't say that to me, or don't treat me that way. You're not dealing with conflict. Can you think of any other examples?
I can't at the moment. I know there's more.
Either.
We'll come.
There are more, but so when you don't deal with conflict, like Melissa said, it's spiritual.
I know.
Bondage.
If something comes up and you tell everyone else about it, but not that person, that is still not dealing with conflict. That's just gossiping.
Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. And the thing is like, it's important that, like you were talking about your friend, it's important that we work through things with Jesus. It's important that we're working on forgiving people on the side. It's not that we have to go head to head with someone every single time. But in my experience, I can work all I want with Jesus and I can forgive all I want, but I still have that like weird, unsettled, like feeling when I'm with the person. And I mean it in my heart when I say I've forgiven them for hurting me, but maybe nothing's changing because I haven't actually gone into the conflict and said, I need this not to happen anymore.
Because there's been no healing.
There's no healing. Yeah. And so, yeah, anyways, but the Bible talks a lot about forgiving one another and being in harmony with each other and, dealing with conflict really. And in Matthew, it says, if your brother or sister sins, go and point out their fault just between the two of you. So let me stop here. If you don't deal with conflict, your frustration at people will come out sideways.
Yes.
Have not heard that term. Learn it and listen to it.
Our mom says it, and it's just a brilliant way.
Yeah, therapists say it. Your feelings will come out sideways, meaning they're not going to come out directly at the problem. They're going to come out at everything else around you. And maybe they will come out at the person who has the problem, but they're not going to come out in a way that makes sense because you're not saying, hey, that one time you said this, you hurt me.
Yeah.
You're just like, oh, well, of course you would say that. It gets snarky and sarcastic.
I'm a visual person. So a lot of phrases and things that are said, I immediately conjure up visuals. And every time that phrase is said, I always pictured like a bottle of soda that has been shaken up and then it's only cracked at the top. So it's not coming all out, but it's going all over everything else. Yeah. Because it's coming out sideways and it's shooken up and it's ready to explode, but it's not exploding straight out. It's going all over everything else.
Yes. Yeah, that's really good. And so it says, go and talk to the person just between the two of you. So this means you're not going to everyone around you. No, Melissa and I have talked about this and we will keep talking about this. There are times you need to process with another believer who has wisdom and discernment and will guide you towards Jesus and will pray for you and help you see the other person's side, help you see the whole picture. I'm not saying never do that. But if you're talking to 5 people about how annoyed you are at this one person, instead of telling the one person who hurt you, you hurt me, or, that frustrated me or whatever, that's not biblical. It's not going to the person, just the two of you. If you're sassing them online or you're just getting little quips in at a party or whatever, that is not what the Bible's talking about. The Bible is saying, go to them, just the two of you, not including social media, not including a party when you're just going to kind of dig at them. You're not, that's not what this verse is saying.
Pull them aside and be intentional about the conversation.
Exactly. And in my experience from both ends of this, being the person who has to enter the conflict or the person who's on the other side and is being asked to have conflict with the person or resolve conflict, I should say. I prefer a heads up, and I prefer giving people heads up. So not putting people on the spot, saying, hey, do you have some time that we could talk about what happened the other night? Or I have something I just need to talk about in our relationship. Could we talk about that? And like setting up a time when you're both on like equal ground, where you're both ready and comfortable with the conversation. It gives the other person time to pray about it. If they're going to pray, it gives the other time, I don't know, to just get their head on straight. Hopefully they're seeking the Holy Spirit.
I even do that with my husband. If there's something that we need to talk about that I know might be draining, I will say is, I have something I want to talk to you about. Is now a good time? Like,
yeah, that's good.
Like, cause he's a truck driver. So we talk on the phone quite a bit during the day. And there's times where his day is really easy. And if there's something I need to talk about, he's like, yeah, we can talk now. And there's times where he's like, I can't handle anything more stressed. I'm like, that's fine. And then we wait until we can. So even with
well, I'll never forget one time I texted our older, or Melissa and I have a brother between us. So he's my older brother. I texted him and said, hey, do you have a minute? Can you talk to me? And I was going to ask him a parenting question, but I didn't say that. And he's like, yeah, call me at this time. But Rach, I'm having a really hard week. So if it's a rebuke, you just do it really gently.
Right.
It's like, oh, no, I was just going to ask you a parenting question. But he was willing to hear it. He just needed it to be done really gently and with the knowledge that like he's had a hard week. And I just always appreciated that story. But anyways, so it, there's more to this verse. There's a couple verses here. There's more to it. But the gist I'm focusing on right now is go to them, point out their fault just between the two of you. You don't need to drag a bunch of people into it. And then another verse in Matthew 5, it says, if you're offering your gift at the altar, so this is when they did this, we don't go and offer our gifts at the altar, but let's just say we're surrendering ourselves to God and we're saying, I am, I'm yours today. I'm yours every day, whatever. That's us, offering a gift at the altar, so to speak. And you remember while you're there that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar, not on top of the altar, and first go and reconcile with them. Then come and offer your gift. So like we can offer ourselves to Jesus all day long, and that's good. And he wants that. But also we need to be recognizing, do we have conflict that needs to be resolved?
Well, that's how important it is that we deal with conflict, is that he's like, pause with me and go deal with them. Like that's kind of a huge, it seems like it would be like, continue giving, like, because if you're serving, like a way we can like offer a gift at the altar is to serve like anybody in our church or, with you, whatever. And at the homeless shelter, whatever. And he's literally saying, stop and go deal with that conflict first. Like that says so much about how important it is that we must deal with conflict.
Exactly. And then one more verse I'm going to focus on for this part of our mini series is in Proverbs, a joyful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones. And I love that because it's such a good reminder of why conflict is binding us up when we are not dealing with it. I see it as a crushed spirit, like dried up bones. And that a joyful heart is a heart at peace, a heart that is not at conflict with everyone around them. And, I've regularly said, if I've got like 3 people in my life I'm having conflict with, I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? And I have to look at myself.
I'm the common denominator.
I'm the common denominator. Like, what's happening? Now, I will say I am someone who will go head to head with conflict. And so sometimes there is like, I've gone to Jesus with it, and it's not necessarily that I'm the problem, but it is good to ask yourself, like, what is my problem here? And so
agreed.
Yeah. So, and I mean, the Bible talks about living in harmony with one another and being at peace with one another as best as we can, that we should live at peace with one another. And that does not mean shoving things down. And so you might be someone who goes, well, yeah, that's why I don't talk about things, because I want to live at peace.
But you're not.
You're not at peace within yourself. You don't have that joyful heart, and in your relationships aren't healthy and whole to the best that they can possibly be in that scenario. And so there isn't true peace. There's just surface level peace.
It's pretend peace. I remember Beth Moore said, Beth Moore said something about this years ago. So I used to be like a people pleaser, and I was doing a Bible. So I mean, I think I had like 1 or 2 kids. So it was a long time ago. And, and I was still trying to figure out how to put boundaries around myself and my heart. And she was talking about how peacemakers often are trying to keep pretend peace because there's not actually peace. They're just trying to keep it surface level, like make it feel, but it's actually extremely exhausting because it's not real peace. She said it in a much more eloquent way, but it was, I mean, the fact that I remembered that one line from a video
all these years ago,
18 years ago is
or
huge.
later.
And I've thought about it so much. And so yeah, it's when you are, if you say what Rachel said, that's why I don't deal with it, because I don't want to upset the waves. I don't want to, ruffle people's feathers, whatever. It is draining you, and you don't even realize it,
Yep.
because it is pretend. It is not real. And anything that we carry around that is pretend is not real. That is not meant for us. Like that is not, Jesus did not die to give us life to the fullest for us to carry around crap that he doesn't want us to carry around. And,
Exactly.
And so it is, if you are one of those people when you're like, oh, I am not good at this, this is terrifying. I recommend that you start with a small thing, like just a really small conflict. Don't start with the biggest conflict, because you're going to feel so nervous about it. But and you'll realize that small thing really wasn't that big of a deal. It was just fine. And you'll start to feel those dry bones getting moisture, and you'll start feeling that binding around us being loosened. And so you have to trust the process.
Yeah.
It is worth it.
Well, I have a friend right now who is learning for the first time in her life to address conflict, and it's terrifying to her, and she has so much anxiety over it. But I told her, I was like, pick the people who are the ones that are going to do you right. Right. Yeah. So like, don't start with the hardest person in your life. Right. So I told her, I was like, start with me. Like, I'm gonna receive what you have to say. And one day I saw in her eyes, like I hurt her, and she didn't say anything to me. And so I went to her and I was like, I could tell that didn't sit right with you. Can we talk about it? And she told me, she's like, I probably wouldn't have said it to you, but thank you for coming to me. And then we worked through it, and she's like, I feel so much better. I was like, this is what happens at the end of conflict. When you get to the reconciliation part, you can breathe. Everyone feels so much better. And now you're at ground zero, and you don't have all this baggage you haven't dealt with. You're like, we've cleared the air. And now every little, we're going to hurt each other. We're going to hurt each other. Exactly. I hurt people hurt me. But the next time, if you deal with it, it's like, okay, deal with it. And now we're back at ground zero. Instead of 5 years worth of baggage that's ready to be blown up. And like you said, unscrew that cap just a smidgen, and it's just going to come spewing out sideways. It's not healthy. My husband is not natural at dealing with conflict. This is something that he's gotten a lot better with me, because we've been married for almost 25 years. And so he's had no choice to learn how to deal with conflict with me, but he hasn't been great. And there was some situations in mine and Rachel's family from years ago that he didn't deal with, because he was afraid. His reason was he was afraid he was going to say things he didn't mean, and that he would hurt the relationships. And he ended up literally probably 23 years down the road, it all came flying out in one sitting. And he said way more than he ever would have wanted to say. And I mean, everything is fine. There's been forgiveness and grace, and it's amazing. But he's like, why didn't I deal with that in the beginning? And plus it caused him angst all the time, because things really got better, but he didn't feel that for a long time because he hadn't dealt with it. Right. And so the lack of dealing with conflict, it will come out, and it will either come out in an explosion or in a shutting down of the relationship, and the relationship will no longer exist. We can't really continue to function in relationships when there is ongoing conflict that just builds on itself. Right. Well, I know you use the example of a soda bottle, and that was great. But for me, I have always had the visual of, I'm a pot and the water is boiling, and I'm just trying to put a lid on it to keep the water from boiling, but eventually it's going to boil over if you don't turn the heat down. And the way you get the heat not to be on such a high level is you deal with your conflict. And I've experienced trying to keep the lid on, and it didn't go well. And I have had to take massive steps back from really important relationships for a very long time, because I'm like, I'm not healthy enough to be able to even be in these relationships right now. And and it was all because I hadn't dealt with conflict. And so then when I came back into the relationship, I had to ask for forgiveness for the fact that I had to take such a big step back, that I hadn't been entering into any conflict. And I had to promise I was going to start saying when this person hurt my feelings, or when something was hard, because it's really my responsibility. I can't blame the other person for what they don't know. Exactly. And that's exactly what ended up happening with Bill in our family, is that he was holding on to things that he never really talked to anyone about, but he felt hurt about them, but didn't want to talk to anyone. And so then it just kept building and building, and it became this big volcano. And thankfully everyone loves him enough that because that could have ruined, I mean, that could have, in a lot of families, that could have been it. You're done, you're severed, we're out. And thank you, Jesus, that we all love Jesus and all are regularly working to love each other and have grace for each other no matter what.
when you don't deal with conflict, it is going to suck the life out of you.
Exactly. Okay. So Melissa, we got to wrap this up because it's a mini series. It's got to be small. Do we have a challenge for people as they're listening to this?
Well, I guess evaluate yourself and figure out, be honest with yourself. Do you deal with conflict? And if you don't, keep listening.
Exactly. Okay. All right. Well, thanks so much, guys. And we'll see you tomorrow.
Yep.
Okay. Have a good
Bye.
one.